Come, let us explore the 21st passage of the Great Garuda in Flight, a Dzogchen classic. Together, let us relaxingly recite this morning's passage, which will serve as the root text of our opening lesson. Together, just like the great Garuda eagle that is soaring in the open space, without any elaboration and any comprehensions. It does not aim for anything, nor is it afraid to lose anything. Now, for this to make sense, we need to lay some groundwork by reviewing the fundamentals of mindfulness and meditation. What if mindfulness, also known as sati, was simply a fancy word for noticing? Every time we inhale through our nose, we automatically access the sympathetic aspect of our, what's the word I'm looking for? Autonomic nervous system, ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way, to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination. And because the manner in which we're noticing is vulnerable and passive and random, we do not waste time picking and choosing what to focus on. Instead, we let reality wash over us, sometimes noticing the external, other times the internal, sometimes the physical, sometimes the mental, sometimes the pleasurable, sometimes the painful, sometimes the interesting, sometimes the boring, sometimes the glorious, sometimes the grotesque. The question remains, however, what do we do with that which we noticed during our inhalation? We meditate. And what if meditation, or samadhi, was simply a fancy word for physical relaxing that supports mental release? You see, every time we exhale, especially through our nose, we have evolved to automatically access the parasympathetic aspect of our autonomic nervous system, which is divided between the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. Each time we exhale, this parasympathetic nervous system supports the physical relaxation and mental release to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and even less defining. And figuratively, it could feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although could be tantalizing to the eye, is non-graspable to the hand. Now that we've laid the foundation, let's return to this morning's root text. Just like the great Garuda eagle that is soaring in the open space or the open sky without any elaboration and comprehensions, it does not aim for anything, nor is it afraid to lose anything. And now let's return to our practice text. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. 90% of every phenomenon, 90% of everything, 90% of every being, including humans, including meditation teachers. 90% of humans stomp about the countryside, stomping and snorting, and just happen to be as rigid and fearful and superstitious and controlling and elitist and cryptic and competitive and cruel as they can be. And they think it's a wonderful way to go through life. These are the same meatheads who implore their students to over-focus and over-analyzing, convincing themselves that over-focus will make them peaceful and over-analysis will help them to be wise. Neuroscience teaches otherwise. When we overwork our medial and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, we exhaust the front of our brain to such a degree that we begin presenting with various symptoms of depression, and we trigger our amygdala, which functions as the seat of both anxiety and aggression. However, when we passively cooperate with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems by silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this each time we feel air enter our nostrils, as well as silently and mentally reciting the one-syllable verb ease each time we feel air exit our nostrils. Not only do we calm the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala, but we gently stimulate our anterior cingulate gyrus, which functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy, which helps transform our dread and desire into compassion and love. Like the alchemist's stone of legend transforming lead into gold. So you might ask, are we never to analyze? Are we never to focus? The question is not should we focus or analyze. The question is how are we to do so sustainably in a way that supports the entirety of our central nervous system and all the supporting organs and structures of our body. So here's the wild thing. The more time we spend authentically practicing sati and samadhi, mindfulness and meditation, the more it would seem that our choices, utterances, and deeds flow from love's centered spontaneity, which is really cool. So as we cruise from centered spontaneity, we will focus and analyze spontaneously, effortlessly, sustainably. Likewise, I've never seen an eagle carry a slide rule, a notepad, and a notepad in its talons, no less a sharpened pencil in its beak. The wonders of aeronautics and geometry practiced by the eagle are intuitive. When our intuition is informed by mindfulness and meditations, love, and centeredness, then every other aspect of our life will improve. Let us return to the final part of this morning's root text. It does not aim for anything, nor is it afraid to lose anything. Humans are intuitively drawn to prime numbers. Numbers like 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 or 11 or 13 and so forth. Numbers only divisible, integers divisible only by themselves and 1. And so it has come to be thought that the fundamental duality of Buddhism is pushing and pulling, or dread and desire, or aversion or avarice, or hating and craving. And our job is not to repress those things. For repression undermines mindfulness. It's a rigidity, a contrivance, an act of fear, an indulgence of our controlling tendencies. Instead, we notice whatever dread or desire cartwheels across the stage of our mind as we breathe in, and as we breathe out, we relax automatically, effortlessly, for that is what we are wired to do. And as such, we behave more and more like the magnificent eagles that rule the sky. Having completed our opening lesson, we can now shift gears. It is General Leia Organa Saturday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Sunday Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus so that I could spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I can become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this morning's live stream, together let us play with the latest iteration of very easy meditation practice text, or sadhana, if you're nasty. So remember, let's tie the entire opening lesson up in a big red bow. With every breath we have a choice. Do we actively compete against our Buddha nature, the Buddha nature of our autonomic nervous system, or do we passively cooperate with it? How are we to do that? By silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this each time we inhale through our nostrils, and by silently and mentally reciting the one-syllable verb ease each time we exhale again through our nostrils. Lippy sticky is optional. Now, we can do this while lying down. We could do this while briskly walking through our neighborhood. We could even do this while sitting as sustainably as we've trained our body. Together, let us sit and watch the play of mind and then relax into its non-graspable nature. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions approximately every 13 minutes or so. Alrighty, I don't see questions, so let's dig in. With every inhalation, we could feel like our head is being pulled up, as if it was being pulled up and out of a warm, dark, smelly place we sometimes keep it. And with each exhalation, we can feel our body relaxing. There is an ancient Japanese saying, just sit. Sadly, most people interpret that literally, but it was only ever designed to be applied figuratively. That's an important distinction. So just means we treat our breath the way a student of the violin or the piano might treat a metronome. When we feel our body breathe in spontaneously, we get out of its way and let it notice whatever is going on. Externally or internally, physically or mentally, pleasurably or painfully, in a manner that is interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque. Whenever we feel our body breathing out, we get out of its way and let it relax, at least to a certain degree, for that is what it has already evolved to do. Ancestor Wu insisted that the three treasures of the Tao were Jing, Qi, and Shen, or body, breath, and mind. And this is how we reconcile them. We sit as sustainably and pleasurably as we can, while treating our breath like a metronome, and our mind cooperates. By silently and mentally reciting the one-syllable words, this and then ease. The Buddha did not demand that people cultivate the full lotus position. He was deliciously vague on the matter. He said basically, gather leaves to serve as a cushion, sit cross-legged, and notice. Those who are rigid, those who are superstitious, those who are elitist, will perform a logical fallacy known as moving the goalposts, and will make it just as hard for others. Like the first shogun, who was a peasant, who became second in command to the entirety of the Japanese nation. But then, once he became shogun, enacted legislation to prevent any other peasants from doing what he did. That's known as climbing the ladder and then pulling the ladder up so no one can follow in your footsteps. Those who are elitist care more about their own prestige than the welfare of others, so they make it tougher. However, the most ancient Buddhist statuary depicts Gautama, who is also known as Shakyamuni, who is also known as the Buddha, sitting not in the full lotus position, but in the quarter lotus position, wherein one shin rests upon the other shin in a manner that seems parallel, like the two pieces of bread describing a sandwich or the two black bits of an Oreo cookie. This is symbolic, not of elitism, but of egalitarianism. Those who are rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel are influenced by their worldview to misunderstand the Buddha's teachings. And when they get zero results or negative results from their interpretation of the Buddha's teachings, instead of being flexible enough to re-examine their perceptions and interpretations, they double down and begin spinning fantasies that, enlightenment is for special people in a special place at a special time, and the length of time one must endure training to become a Buddha is 3 times longer than the birth, sustenance, death, and in-between time for a universe. But is that what the Buddha taught? When we read an English translation of the Discourse on the Four Bases of Mindfulness, in the second to final passage, the Buddha explained that one could master his teachings in as little as 7 days. Those whose worldview is flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind have a much easier, pleasurable, and swifter journey of enlightenment. In the early 2000s, when the crust of the earth was still cooling, there was a movie titled What the Bleep Do We Know? And in one part in the movie, there was this hoedown where people are dancing with their IV stands, illustrating how some people get off on being angry and rigid and controlling. It's how they feel alive. You will find people like this in the religious world, in the spiritual world, in the secular world. Wherever there are humans gathered vocationally or recreationally, you will always find a certain percentage who delight in being this way, who don't like the way you sit, and don't like the way you cross your legs, and don't like the way you smile, and just won't rest until you're as miserable as them. As an adult survivor of child abuse, when I encountered people this way, I thought if I just acquiesced to their folly, I could win them over. They would become my friends. No. There are people whose self-esteem and reason for living is all about finding fault and dominating others. So rather than trying to change them or hate them, we can simply access the centered spontaneity cultivated by our mindfulness and meditation, and choose and talk and act accordingly. Perhaps we can think of it this way. According to Buddhist lore, the Buddha had a foolish cousin named Devadatta. And where the Buddha was flexible, Devadatta was rigid. Where the Buddha was loving, Devadatta was fearful. Where the Buddha was rational, Devadatta was superstitious. Where the Buddha was laid back, Devadatta was controlling. In contemporary culture, we could consider the Coen Brothers movie, The Big Lebowski, where the Big Lebowski was elitist. The dude was egalitarian, where the Big Lebowski was cryptic. The dude was lucid, where the Big Lebowski was competitive. The dude was cooperative, where the Big Lebowski was cruel. The dude was kind. If you're as geeky as me, you might contrast the way Mace Windu spoke to Anakin Skywalker versus the way Qui-Gon Jinn spoke to Skywalker. It has been joked that Mace Windu never met a rule he wouldn't follow. The Buddha kept it simple. We can think of Buddhism and any other philosophical or contemplative tradition in terms of two stages: proto-Buddhism and institutional Buddhism. Institutional Buddhism claims there are hundreds of vows, and if we don't keep them, we will be disgraced and punished and have difficulty meditating and go to hell. Yes, there are Buddhists who preach hell. The Buddha kept it simple. He taught that 50% of the Eightfold Path consisted of loving kindness, kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and even kind commerce. Being kind to the checkout clerk who was undertrained and causing people to wait 30 minutes in line. Being kind to everybody. That doesn't mean lying to ourselves about what we feel. It means we get to be authentic, yet kind. So sometimes we have our sourpuss while still choosing kindness. How are we to know what the kind thing is? We don't have to. The more we authentically watch the play of mind and relax into its non-graspable nature, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds will flow from love's centered spontaneity. Perhaps that is why the late Karma Jigme Rinpoche insisted that it is only non-violence that is the essence of morality, which of course makes it difficult to endorse any form of genocide, anything that exploits the vulnerable, even if it makes a profit. Some people practice physical violence. Some people practice verbal violence. Some people practice financial violence. Some people practice organizational violence. Some people practice legal violence, forever embroiled in one lawsuit after the other. What a profoundly efficient way to squander one's time and energy. Let us flow like water. When water encounters an obstacle, it flows around it, or over it, or under it, or it stagnates and evaporates until it precipitates downward once again, beyond the obstacle. And by the way, whether water flows or stagnates, or evaporates, or precipitates. It does all of that spontaneously, effortlessly, automatically. Perhaps that is why Lao Tzu described the three treasures of the Tao as simplicity, patience, and compassion. What is enlightenment? Enlightenment is not an absence of perception. It is not an absence of emotion or intention or cognition. It is not an absence of recollection or imagination. Enlightenment is simply getting so good at the Eightfold Path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Now, if you were even half as lazy as me, then you could rejoice in the idea that when we practice the seventh and eighth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, simply watching the play of mind, the antics of mind, and relaxing into its non-graspable nature, and doing so in harmony with our inhalations and exhalations, as if our breathing was just a metronome, then the remaining 6 folds of the path take care of themselves. We cannot help but notice change, whether we want to or not. That's the first fold. We feel ourselves automatically practicing kinder intentions, communications, behaviors, and even calmers, the second, third, fourth, and fifth folds. And we find that we are practicing the right effort. That is the effortless effort. Our choices, utterances, and deeds lovingly flowing from centered spontaneity, the 6th fold. All of those things are the effortless byproduct. Silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this each time we feel air enter our nostrils, as well as silently and mentally reciting the one-syllable verb ease each time we feel air exit our nostrils. I'm going to take a moment to adjust my legs because arthritis is no fun. And you might say, well, can't you just meditate arthritis away? Meditation is not about changing things. It's about noticing things and letting go of things. It's about creating the setting where our choices and utterances and deeds flow from love's centered spontaneity. No longer is there a need to plot and coerce and connive. The famous psychotherapist Carl Gustav Jung talked about the collective unconscious, which can serve as a metaphor of serendipity. If I have a brainstorm about an app for the smartphone that is blockchain and allows for direct liquid democracy, thus making the Senate and the House of Representatives, corrupt as they are, obsolete. I might come face to face with the fact that I've not spent 20 or 30 or 40 years becoming an expert in the area of programming. But I might be able to spontaneously and effortlessly pass it on to those who are, or simply pass it on to others who can pass it on to others who can pass it on to others who are. When Carl Gustav Jung taught that the collective conscious wishes to express itself, and if it won't express itself through you, it'll find someone else to express itself through. That wasn't meant to be a threat. It was meant to reassure us that we can cooperate with the collective unconscious passively, vulnerably, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. We can cooperate with the collective unconscious from a place of not scattered spontaneity, nor contrivance, but centered spontaneity. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return for tonight's evening meditation class as well as group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.